Morning, my name is Nick Capodice. I work in the Education Department of the Lower East Side Tenement Museum. And what we're going to give you today is a bit of a behind-the-scenes view of our institution, our museum, and 97 Orchard Street. Have a good look. It was built in 1863. It looks a lot like all the other tenements on the block, but this one is unique in the nation, actually. This building was built in 1863 during the Lincoln administration. But what makes it special is it was condemned in 1935. Nobody has lived in this building since 1935. It was undiscovered until about 1988 when our museum founders found this building, uninhabited for 53 years.
Oh, wow.
And what we do is we give tours of this building and we tell people the history of who just happened to live in it. We estimate between 1863 and 1935, about 7,000 people lived in this building. Not at the same time, but it's still very crowded. But I'm going to show you a couple of the spaces, and we'll begin with the hallway. This is how we discovered it in 1988. Very little has changed. Follow me. Past these mailboxes here. I'm a huge fan of the mailbox. We found mail in them, actually, from the 1920s and the 1930s.
That's crazy.
I'll show you a piece of mail later if you want. Wow. This is the hall. Come on in. What do you think?
It's incredible. I was not expecting this. So this is basically exactly how it was found.
Yep. With a very few, here I'll show you some of the things we did. So these are roundels, these beautiful murals. When we discovered the building, it looked like this one behind you, Dave.
Oh, okay.
All covered in black soot, but we scrubbed up the medallion on this side, and we found these paintings hidden underneath.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of
Ornate,
right? Yeah. And I kind of, what we were talking about earlier is like apartments used to be for lower income people.
Right.
It seems ornate for.
So, what does this tell you? This. So when you go on a tenement tour, we like to, we ask a lot of questions. We love getting asked questions, but notions of beauty and what's affordable. But these people cared about their homes. They chose to decorate. Ceilings made of pressed metal. This wall covering is actually burlap cloth, shellacked in linseed oil. But I want to show you what it looked like for the first 40 years.
Okay.
From 1863 until about 1905.
Sure.
And we're going to have to pretend that there's no windows in either of these doors.
Okay.
They were solid wood. So here we go.
Okay.
Ready? All right. It was like this for 40 years. All these light bulbs we'd unscrew, utter darkness until gaslight was put in 1905. This building.
That's this right here?
Yeah, there's gas jets, and you live in New York. You might see these little pipes coming out of your
Right.
walls. These gas jets were mandated by law in 1905.
Okay.
There used to be no plumbing in the building until 1905. So you had outhouses. We have a picture.
Wow.
4 outhouses in the rear yard. The
wild.
1900 census had 111 people living in this building, sharing, and a water spout. One source of clean water in the backyard.
So there's no indoor plumbing whatsoever.
There wasn't until 1905.
Wow.
And that's kind of a very special year because there was a law passed in 1901 called the Tenement House Act, which forced landlords to put basic amenities in these tenements.
Sure.
You can imagine the landlords' opinions about this law. But this was due to the progressive movement. These are women and men fighting to get conditions improved in these tenement buildings.
Oh.
This is the oldest thing in the building, the banister. We like to have all tours touch it. You can touch it. This is the one thing you can touch. It's mahogany. It's in great shape.
Wow.
All 7,000 people who lived here touched it at some point. Did your ancestors come through New York?
I'm actually not sure.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Snoop around a little.
Yeah.
But this was like a first home for
a lot of people.
Yeah. What we do is, we study the stories of newcomers. Why did they come? What did they find here? What did they do? And how did they make us who we are as a nation right now? And if you can relate that to 2016, you're more than welcome. But I want to show you.
Take from that what you will, I guess.
Take from that what you will. But the first space I want to show you is we call it our ruin,
Okay.
like the pyramids of Giza. But ours is an abandoned tenement apartment. It's how we discovered it. It's got about 20 layers of wallpaper, 40 layers of paint.
Wow.
And that's where all our tours start, is this ruin space. So come on up.
So this whole place was just completely abandoned for years and years and years.
Years and years. There were 2 storefronts here that
Right.
remained open, and there were stores in the basement, but above here, untouched.
Wow.
Here we are. Head on in there. You can check that out.
So if you're just joining us, we're in the Tenement Museum in New York. This is an old apartment building that was discovered. It was abandoned when again? It was
Condemned in 1935
Okay.
and rediscovered in 1988.
Wow. It's almost like an architecture, like a dig site.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
that's a wonderful way to put it. So we have a book, actually have a book right by my desk that has all 22 layers of wallpaper
Right.
that are on these walls.
That's
And you
wild.
study those to understand fashion, going all the way to the early paint, going all the way to the brick or the plaster and lath, the 1860s, Lincoln administration. And if you look, I mean, it may be hard to see, but just layers and layers of wallpaper, layers of history, layers of newcomers. And if we recreate an apartment, we recreate the wallpaper we find here.
okay.
We recreate the paint we find here. So we study the building to teach us about the people.
Right.
But more interesting than the history of the building to me is the stories of the people who happen to live here. We only tell stories of real people who just so happen to live at this address.
Wow.
And we research them obsessively. We study, city directories, we study the census, birth certificates, death certificates. Then we can connect to like ship manifests, anything we can get our hands on to the tenants of this building. And we tell them full of bizarre complications. Would you like to see a restored apartment? Go back in time?
Yeah, that would be amazing.
So we're gonna. Oh, actually, I'll show you the layout of the space. This is a living room.
Okay.
Hey-o. This is the kitchen. And this is the grand master bedroom.
Wow.
I'm gonna guess not too different in size, maybe from your place.
Yeah, no, it's
Brooklyn.
about the same.
Same size as my apartment in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
but it's just me and my wife and our very loud son. But the average family capacity for this apartment in 1900 would be between about 6 and 7 people living in an apartment this big.
Just trying to get a shot of how small it really is. For people
It's
not
not too
living in
bad.
New York, I mean,
That's the great thing.
that's you know.
Because our tours have maximum 15 people on a tour.
Right.
You can't just wander around in our building because maybe it's not safe to go alone, but it's also
Right.
because the tour is the story
Right.
of the people who lived here. And it's sort of a personal, special experience to go on.
Yeah.
But we're going to go to the 1860s
Okay.
to a woman
Let's
who
do it.
came to America when she was 22 from Germany. This is Natalie Gumpertz's apartment. So we're stepping into another apartment. I'll even give you an idea of a day
Wow.
like today. If we close this door, the darkness,
Right.
the heat in the summertime
Oh yeah.
of an apartment like this.
Pretend that is not.
Yeah, the fan. This is regrettably a necessity on things like today.
Yeah.
When it gets over 80, we turn the fans
Right.
on. But this is back when this neighborhood wasn't known as the Lower East Side. This
Yeah.
neighborhood used to be called Klein Deutschland.
Oh wow.
Yeah, Little Germany. Do you have any
Yeah.
German
No.
ancestry?
Well, maybe I don't
You
know.
got some.
I have a red beard. I don't know. I'm definitely Swedish, but
Okay.
the rest is kind of a mystery. Like I'm sure
Yeah.
a lot of Americans are.
Well, more Germans came to the United States in the 20th and 19th century than any other immigrant group.
Wow.
And a ton of them came here. Little Germany. First instance of a non-English speaking immigrant enclave in U.S. history. This is the typology for every Chinatown, every
Right.
barrio, every little Bangladesh. 726 beer saloons in this neighborhood in 1872. And Natalie Gumpertz, who lived here, she was a German Jew who came to America when she was 22 years old, and she shows up on the census record. These are our best friends, by the way.
Right.
We always share with our visitors how we know who we know. How do we know who lived here? What do they do for work? How much money did they have?
Uh-huh.
And Natalie and Julius lived here and had 2 kids,
Okay.
Rosa and Nanny. And they mentioned I had 2 more. So picture mom and dad and 4 kids. Whooping it up in this apartment. But the point we try to get people to is to understand Natalie came to America when immigration was pretty much unrestricted. Anybody, could come here. We didn't have any, we had very minimal process.
Sure.
Because we were a big country, we needed people.
Yeah.
And they lived here when the greatest, so far, depression of the U.S. happened. The Great Panic of 1873.
Okay.
Unemployment skyrocketed to 25%. Desperate for work. And then you had a nation with super high unemployment, very low immigration restrictions. And you get to see how history sort of affects policy over the years.
Wow.
But the personal story is one morning in 1874, Julius Gumpertz, her husband, went to work at a shoe factory on Day Street and was never heard from again. He vanished, leaving mom, 4 kids, in a building full of Germans. No income. And we're trying to figure out how did she get by in these hard times? Who could she turn to? What was available to her in the 1870s, 1880s to survive? And you can come into the parlor. This is an apartment living room converted into a dress shop.
Oh wow!
Because she, in order to survive, she became a dressmaker.
Wow.
The 1870 census, she's just keeping her house, and in the 1880 census, she's a dressmaker. With 3 daughters.
Wow.
The son, her son passed away a year after the father disappeared. So there's sad parts in these stories, but there's happy parts in the stories too.
Well, yeah, it's an amazing. Talk about gumption, I guess.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, this is the thing. We know. These people who came. Why did they come? I don't know if I would have. I came here from New Hampshire when I was 21 years old. You moved here from Portland.
From Portland, yeah.
Right. That's a big move. That's got gumption, right?
Yeah.
Imagine being 22,
like
single woman without your parents, coming on a boat to the U.S. What kind of person does that? What kind of person sacrifices everything they know to roll the dice in a new land? Bold. People like Natalie. Oh, and we conclude the tour. I'm going to leave out all the juicy parts of the tour.
Okay.
There's some really cool stuff.
You have to come in person to see that.
Yeah, I guess so. But I do want to show you a photograph of Natalie Gumpertz. Here she is. This is the one photograph we have of her.
Did she live in New York all her life?
She did.
Wow.
She was actually able to get out of this neighborhood due to a rather bizarre sequence of events. She passed away in her late 50s.
Wow.
But she was able to move out of the Lower East Side.
Is this her as well? Or
No, that's her daughter.
Oh, wow. So this is her lineage.
Yeah, and then her granddaughter. And then it continues, all the way to her great-great-great-grandchildren, who the descendants living all across the United States.
Have they visited here?
Some have, yeah. Some have.
That would
I don't know a ton of them. We're just grateful. We're so grateful to the descendants of the people who lived here that they're willing to share these stories with us.
That would be amazing to come back here and kind of...
But I wanted to also show you an apartment of a different tour. It's called our Sweatshop Workers tour.
Okay, cool.
It's about 2 Eastern European Jewish families who lived in the building around the turn of the century, who both worked in the garment industry. And it's about the contrast in their lives and how they observe their faith, their religion, in the home and at work.
Okay.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, let's check it out. So a parlor, what's the difference between a parlor and a living room?
It's
interchangeable?
The difference between a violin and a fiddle.
Okay.
It's just,
it's just
one you keep in a haversack and one you keep in a case. But a parlor is it's also sometimes called the nice room.
Huh.
But when you live in a space this small, with a lot of people, every room is the bedroom at night.
Right.
Every room is the kitchen during the day.
Sure.
Fire escapes on a day like today. Take a snooze on the fire escapes.
Yeah.
Go to Central Park, as you were saying earlier.
Right.
You make it work.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of people. So this is the 1870s. We're going to go forward in time 27 years to 1897.
Okay.
Oh, before we go, I do have to show you one cool thing.
Yeah, of course.
Before we go in there. Come on. Because we saw the mailboxes down. So this is another ruined space. This is where we start a lot of our stories. These are artifacts that we found in this building.
Wow.
We piece together stories based on what we found. Right? Did you notice? Do you see what this is?
Is that a... Oh, it's a library card. My God.
Not a card. You're
Oh,
close.
no.
It's even worse. It's something of which maybe you and I are familiar. It's an overdue library book notice.
Oh, okay.
We found that in the mailbox from 1929. Sylvia Katz checked out a book on. It's called Israel, and what we did is we contacted the New York Public Library, and they were able to find the ISBN number of this book.
Wow.
So it was great. So Sylvia Katz checked out a book about Jewish people, and she never returned it in 1929. So, you know, on a tour, we'll show you stuff like this,
So funny.
but then we find stuff like this. And taking the New York City subway, you've seen, this is a leaflet, a flyer,
Okay.
and it says, "Learn English quick." It's in Yiddish.
Oh.
It's an ad to learn English.
Wow.
You could go across the Brooklyn Bridge to Williamsburg and take an English class.
Right.
So we've got newcomers working in the garment industry, working 6-day weeks.
Right.
Some people who have enough money, who have enough time, who don't have big families, can go across the bridge and take an English class. But the odds of you being able to do that, frankly, are slim. But contrast that to these children's, these people's kids who are checking out books at the library in English to learn about Jewish people,
Right.
to learn about their parents and where they came from.
So what's the difference between... Is this around the same time?
It is around the same
Wow.
time. It's around the turn of the century. Yeah. I mean, this is a little later. This is about 15 years later.
I see.
So this is the difference of a generation.
Yeah.
You know, and you can see it in photos. You know, this is a photo of the street where we were just hanging out
Right.
outside. 1898. Most crowded place in New York, perhaps the planet. Historians are still arguing but it was modern day Mumbai population
Wow.
density. But if you explore these old photos, you see people dressed like they would have dressed back in the old country. You see
Right.
people adapting to America at the same time. It's an array. There's
Yeah.
different ways of becoming American, just like the Yiddish, just like the library. But we recreated the apartment of a guy named Harris Levine, who was a dressmaker who lived here,
Right.
and we were able to get photographs of some of his descendants. So I'll show you.
All right. Yeah.
Some love of linoleum here.
Man, just scraping back the layers of
Yeah.
this. This is... So
I love this. This is
this
yeah. Go ahead.
linoleum was... This was like...
This
like
was the
one?
top layer that we found, right?
Wow.
And then, sorry, it must have been a little bit under this greenish one there.
It's almost like 1970s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they used to call linoleum the rug you can mop, the washable rug. It was considered quite
So
clean
funny.
because you could
Right.
wash it as opposed to a carpet because you didn't have a
Yeah.
good vacuum.
Yeah.
1920s. I love linoleum.
Yeah.
It was always worn out around the sink. So people, that's where
Oh,
it
yeah,
was
it's standing there.
You know? So this is a recreation of a dress factory.
And people would have these in their apartments? Like a dress... What you think of as a
Yeah,
factory
right.
is like...
When you think of the word, we call this tour Sweatshop Workers.
Right.
When you think of a sweatshop, you can imagine
Huge factory. Yeah.
huge factory, rows of machines, people
Yeah.
hunched over. Initially, this block, teeny block that we were on, had 23 garment factories on it. 70% of women's clothes in America made here in New York, mostly in shops like this, people's homes. You know, Harris was one of those people, and this is his dress factory.
So this is kind of... This was the fashion of the time?
This was we recreated this dress based on
On old
a
photos?
fashion magazine, you
Wow.
know, from the era. This is November 1897. Harris is a ladies' tailor, and he makes dresses. This is the pinnacle of when this neighborhood was the center of the garment industry.
Right. Okay.
We found an old inspection, what do you call it? Inspection report of his factory, and he had 3 employees in addition to himself working.
It's a small operation.
It is, but they weren't his family.
Okay.
So we had mom, dad, 5 kids, 3 extra employees, sometimes 4, working here making dresses.
I do not envy the.
Oh, yeah.
I do not envy the woman that would have to wear something
Dress
like
like
that
that,
on
yeah.
a day like today.
Well, a dress like this, you could buy for about $10 at Macy's. These are dresses for Macy's and Bloomingdale's.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. These were for dresses for the nation.
Right.
You know, all the dresses in America, shops like these.
That's incredible.
Harris Levine and his wife Jenny would not wear a dress like this. Because this rent for this apartment was about $12 a month.
Right.
So a $10 dress. It's not in your comfort zone.
Right. Yeah.
But what we found in that same inspection report is that Harris worked, everybody at this time in America worked a 6-day work week, Monday through Saturday,
Sure.
and had Sunday off.
Yeah.
But when you have the Eastern European Jewish migration to America, the Sabbath for them is Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they going to do? They could break the Sabbath and work on Saturday,
Uh-huh.
which is what business owners in New York would expect you to do.
Right.
Or if you worked for another Jewish guy or a Jewish woman, then you could keep the Sabbath. So he had said on his report that he worked on Sunday instead of Saturday.
Wow.
And this neighborhood would shut down from Friday night till Saturday night for the Sabbath. Yeah, it's a foot treadle sewing machine. It's a beautiful thing.
So all the, you know, even down to the tools, everything is
Yeah.
is down
It's
to the
sourced from the era. We have a lovely we have a bunch of collections, not a bunch of collections managers, but a couple.
Right.
One young lady travels the country looking for stuff that's historically accurate to these apartments.
I imagine that must be so difficult because to our eyes, something, you know, like something from the 1920s might look like
Right.
something from the
Right.
the 1880s.
And that's what I say to her, and she's like, no.
No, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's fun in the wintertime in here versus it's so cold here in the winter.
Right.
And it gets dark at like 3 p.m. in the winter. And just picturing these people making dresses for uptown ladies in shops like this.
Yeah.
And with kerosene lamps, just trying to get through. But also, you found in factories like this, you'd work with people who were like you. You know, you'd work with people from your own hometown, Poland or from Lithuania or something like that. So it's these little United Nations, like these little enclaves of Plansk, Poland, Galicia, you know, all these little Eastern European nations. Garment factories. And I'll show you the kitchen too.
All right.
So we recreate this space for when Jenny Levine was 8.5 months pregnant with her third kid. So picture being, you know, pregnant in this space. No running water in the building yet. You gotta go down 3 flights of stairs to get fresh water.
I do have one question. I was just wondering what these windows are. Why are there windows inside?
So I'm looking at you through it's called a tubercular window.
Right.
They weren't original to the building.
Okay.
They were actually required by that 1901 law that I mentioned downstairs.
Sure.
But we had architectural evidence these were put in a little earlier by perhaps a benevolent landlord.
Huh.
They let light and air sweep through your apartment.
Oh, okay.
So that's what they're called the tubercular windows. They prevent tuberculosis.
So it's like having a wall, but you can still
Yeah,
get the
you
light
can
from
see through
outside.
it, sure.
Oh man, that's.
So they had the Levine family who lived here had 3 daughters, and I love to show the 3 daughters, Faye, Ava, and Pauline. This is in 1970 in Miami, Florida. The descendants of the Levines, you know. And this is Harris and Jenny Levine before they passed away. They got to walk the Williamsburg Bridge in 1905, moved to Brooklyn with their 5 kids, became a private tailor. They got out of here. You know, this story, I'm not saying it's a bad neighborhood, but there was mobility. There was a way to move forward, to achieve something.
Right.
Do you want to see one last apartment?
Of course, yeah.
I'll show you just a sneak peek of the Rogoshevsky apartment.
So these hallways, these are kind of left as you guys found them?
It's got pressed metal on the walls. This is how it was in the 30s, 1930s.
Were there squatters during that time, do you know? Or
Well, I know that there weren't because there were stores downstairs.
Right.
They chased they wouldn't, you couldn't sleep above a shop.
Sure.
So in essence, because stores opened up downstairs, that preserved this building. This is the last tenement preserved like this in the country. It's a special thing to see.
And the store owners just kind of let this, they didn't ever, to your knowledge, kind of venture in and poke around.
If any of you viewers out there ever went to the Lower East Side in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it was a different neighborhood. It was declining population due to very restrictive immigration quotas in the 1920s,
Mm.
which basically said no more Eastern European Jews allowed, no more Italians allowed. This was from 1924. It's called the National Origins Act, and it was lifted in 1965.
Mm.
LBJ, 1965, lifted this race-based immigration quota of the 1920s. But I'll just show you briefly this space before we head out the back. This is the Rogoszewski family. Mom and Dad sleep here. They had 6 kids. They had 2 girls and 4 boys. The 4 boys slept on the couch. Philip, Samuel, Henry, and Morris. And the girls slept in the kitchen on the bed. And we know this
Wow.
because Henry, when he was in his 90s, told us where he and his family slept. We were able to interview this gentleman before he
amazing.
passed away. Yeah, if we're really lucky, we can get in touch with a descendant, or sometimes someone who actually lived here. To my knowledge, there's one surviving tenant of 97 Orchard Street right now who lives.
And he was able to kind of describe his apartment at all?
Yeah,
to you
described
guys?
it where he remembered where he and his brothers slept, and he remembered where his sisters slept.
Wow.
And then we are able to contact other people, you know, like the grandchildren of these people who remember
Sure.
these apartments, or their neighbors. We know this family had Italian neighbors across the air shaft,
Okay.
one of whom was a 9-year-old girl who actually came back to our museum in the 1990s, and we have extensive oral history of hers. She's on the Hard Times tour. She remembered coming into here to turn on the lights for the Rogoszewskis on Sabbath, on Shabbos, because they weren't allowed to use the electricity, right? It's a mitzvah, it's good luck to turn on, and she loved it. So we got a Sicilian Catholic girl, excited to do this, to do something for this Jewish family. This is cities. These are people crammed up against each other and getting to know each other.
Sure.
Yeah. Today's the last day of Ramadan. If you walk around New York tomorrow morning, you're going to see these feasts laid out, and you're going to see people not sure what's going on, but intermingling with these people. So that's what I like about New York. New York's still an immigrant city. 36% foreign born. And if you extend that to the children, like the Rogoszewskis, 66% in New York.
That's wild.
66%. And they're going through the same things these families went through.
Right.
Well, on this tour, we talk about the kids speaking English, the kid and the parents speaking Yiddish, and the mother passing down these traditions. You know, lighting the Sabbath candles. This is the Sabbath table. Friday night, saying the prayers.
And that still goes on to this day. I mean, there's still those first generation kids who are speaking English to their parents, and
the parents. Yeah, I don't want to be glum, but there's a great scholar who said a quote that I've just never forgotten, which was, "America is the graveyard of languages." It really depressed me a little bit, but it's kind of, you know, but I wouldn't. I'm an optimist, right? I don't consider America the graveyard of culture. I think it adapts here in this nation, for sure. But who knows what it adapts into? Kind of adapts into you and me,
right?
Being here like this. But this is where it starts. This is where who we are starts. So what I'm going to take you is out the back.
Okay.
Show you the privies, and I'll tell you about one last exciting thing before we say goodbye. How you doing?
Great.
Good.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. Let's
this
go
is
outside.
Awesome.
Here's Allen Street. This wasn't here. We had to build this fire exit.
What would we be hearing instead of the traffic that we're hearing right now? What would we
you'd hear very little except for people, because what you'd be looking at is the back of another row of tenements.
Oh,
they were all knocked down in the 30s to make Allen Street a double wide, to make it, and also there was an elevated train right over there, roaring overhead.
Oh, okay.
And you just hear humanity, people in these backyards, most crowded place ever, you know, 111 people, 4 toilets, and every apartment building was another one just like it.
Yeah.
People doing their laundry, people singing, people fighting. You hear Yiddish. Later you'd hear Italian. Before that you'd hear German. After that you hear Spanish when the Puerto Ricans come to New York in a big wave.
Right.
Then you hear Chinese in the 60s. So these are the privies. We talk about these in our Irish Outsiders here. I don't know. There's some Irish too, maybe in you. You never know. Right?
Yeah, possibly.
Irish.
Yeah.
So we talk about being Irish in German neighborhood on that tour. That's on the 4th floor. We didn't go up there, but it's a cool one. But these are the we recreated these privies out of some a gentleman had a barn in upstate New York, and we built them to specifications of the era.
And you have photos of these too as well. This is
Sure.
like basically.
Yeah. Oh, actually, the photo I showed you earlier, that to be honest, that's of a different apartment building,
Oh, okay.
but it's enough of a historical record.
Right.
But we dug here. We have architectural evidence. We found the privy vault under
Wow,
here.
that's
we found some
insane.
stuff in it. You know? Yeah. Hello. How you doing?
Wow.
So, I guess by way of ending, I wanted to tell you something very exciting. Most exciting thing. I've worked here 7 years. In my 7 years, it is on July 4th, 2017. We're going to open our new exhibit
Okay.
because this building was closed in '35. No one's lived here since then. Our story stops in 1935.
Right.
And that's frustrating to us because immigration didn't stop in
Yeah.
1935. Above our visitor center, we're going to recreate the apartment of a family who came in the 1940s. Refugees from the Holocaust, survivors from the DP camps. This was at a time when the United States was not letting those people in. And President Truman signed an executive order in 45 to allow just a couple thousand into the U.S., survivors from these camps. 2 of them lived right above our gift shop. We're going to recreate their apartment. It's also going to be the family of a Puerto Rican family who lived there in the 60s and the 50s. They worked in the garment industry. And then that same apartment, Chinese family who lived here up until we talk about the decline of the garment industry in Chinatown around September 11, 2001.
Wow.
So we're finally bringing it up almost to present.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
Wow. And I wonder what, you could only speculate in 50 years what we're going to be talking about.
That's an
what new
interesting
exhibit
thought.
might be opening up.
What would be, well, let's see, you live in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
So if we went forward in time 100 years,
Right.
150 years, what would be the Tenement Museum in 100 years? Would it be an apartment building in Manhattan? Where are new immigrants living in New York?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn,
Yeah,
sure.
Brooklyn, Queens.
Queens,
Yeah.
sure. That's the new,
Bronx.
Manhattan is not the hotbed it once was in
Right.
newcomers. But yeah, Brooklyn, Queens. And it's not just apartments, it's basements
Yeah.
in buildings. I don't know if you know in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it's further out. It's New Hampshire. It's New Jersey.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story.
And people are sharing apartments in interesting ways as well, too. Like turning a living room into a bedroom.
Exactly.
It's kind of full circle, sadly enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who really knows what it'll be in 100 years?
Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing I love to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Where we'll be. That sort of time. But we can, not to sound cheesy or hokey, but this is how we learn about them.
Right.
We approach history through the stories of ordinary people. That's what we do best at Tenement. And we can learn an awful, awful lot from what these people went through. Both how they dealt with things within their own families and how they were viewed from the outside, too.
Right.
And then who they became.